For years, my identity was a contract I never signed. I was the good daughter. It was a role I played so well that I forgot the script wasn't mine. The silence in our home was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It was the sound of my own dreams being shelved, my opinions being swallowed, my future being decided for me. I was loved deeply, but I wasn't truly seen. They loved the reflection they had created, and my greatest fear was that if I moved, if I showed them my true self, the reflection would shatter, and so would I.
What happens when the role you were born to play begins to suffocate the person you were meant to become? Today, we're honored to share the powerful testimony of Lena Petrov from New York, a woman who had to break her family's heart to save her own soul. I'm your host, Susan Bentley, and this is Unbroken Women, a place for stories of courage, resilience, and radical self-emancipation.
My world smelled like my mother's borscht and my father's strong coffee. It was a world of unspoken rituals. Every morning I was up first to prepare that coffee. Every afternoon I translated the mail, navigated the bureaucracy of a new country that still felt foreign to them after 30 years. Every evening I helped my younger sister, Anna, with her homework, my own ambitions collecting dust on a shelf in my mind. My life was a rhythm of service, a quiet hum of duty. My parents, in their own way, were proud. They'd look at me with a sad, deep love, a love that said, "You are our anchor. You are our reliable one." It felt like warmth, but it was the warmth of a perfectly fitted cage. My friends in the city were living entirely different lives. Their Instagram feeds were filled with promotions, solo trips to Lisbon, graduate school acceptance letters. I'd look at their lives through the small screen of my phone and feel a pang of something I couldn't name. It felt like envy, but it was deeper. It was grief for a version of myself I was too afraid to even imagine. My own dream, to study social work, was a whisper so faint I could barely hear it anymore. It was a foolish, selfish thought in a life that was supposed to be about everyone but me. The weight of being the good daughter wasn't a single heavy thing. It was 1,000 tiny pebbles in my pockets every single day. It was the way I'd automatically say no to an invitation because I knew my parents would need me. It was the tightness in my chest when a relative would praise me for being so devoted, a compliment that felt like a chain. Guilt was my shadow, following me into every room. It was there when I felt a spark of resentment, and it was there to punish me for feeling it. I was performing, constantly, the cheerful daughter, the responsible sister, the patient translator. But underneath the performance, I felt myself shrinking. My voice got quieter, my opinions softer, my own needs felt illegitimate. I was becoming a ghost in my own life story. My only purpose to serve the needs of the main characters, my family. It was a slow, quiet suffocation, and the most painful part was that nobody could see I was dying for a breath of air. The first real crack appeared on Tuesday. I was on the subway, heading home with groceries. Across from me sat a young woman, about my age, her face illuminated by her laptop. She was highlighting a passage in a digital textbook, a focused, determined look in her eyes. I saw the title of the PDF, Introduction to Clinical Social Work. It was a punch to the gut, a physical jolt. For a full 30 seconds, I wasn't on the Q train. I was in a lecture hall. I was in a library. I was her. I imagined a life where my brain was used for something other than translating utility bills, where my heart was used to help strangers instead of just placating my parents. The fantasy was so vivid, so intoxicating, that when the train lurched to a stop, I felt a wave of profound sadness wash over me. Then, immediately, the guilt came rushing in to extinguish it. "How dare you?" the voice in my head scolded. "Your parents sacrificed everything to give you a life here, and you sit here dreaming of leaving them?" I pushed the feeling down, deep down, and told myself it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was the first whisper of a rebellion I didn't even know I was capable of. The illusion of our perfect traditional family shattered the day my sister Anna eloped. She left a note on her pillow, a simple, tear-stained apology that felt like a declaration of war in our quiet apartment. The discovery was apocalyptic. My mother's wail was a sound I'd never heard before, a primal cry of betrayal that seemed to shake the very walls. My father, however, was worse. He didn't yell. He became terrifyingly still, his face a mask of stone, his silence more damning than any tirade. The phone calls began immediately, to aunts, uncles, cousins. The news spread like a virus, and with it, a torrent of shame and fury directed at my sister, the traitor. In the eye of the storm, my parents turned to me. They expected me to be their ally in grief, to condemn Anna, to shore up the family's broken honor. I played my part, murmuring words of comfort, my own heart a confused mess of shock, and a terrifying secret thrill for my sister's courage. But the moment that changed everything came later that night. My father, his eyes filled with a chilling mixture of pain and pride, put his hand on my shoulder. "This is what happens when they forget where they come from," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank God, we have one good daughter." In that instant, his praise didn't feel like love. It felt like a life sentence. I was the consolation prize, the dutiful one left to pay for her sister's freedom. I saw my future spooling out in front of me, a long, empty hallway of sacrifice, ending in a quiet room where I'd care for them until the end. The standard wasn't just high. It was impossible. The price of being the good daughter was my entire life. My first instinct was to run deeper into the cage. I tried to become the perfect daughter, amplified. I cooked elaborate meals they barely touched. I cleaned the apartment until it gleamed. I tried to fill the cavernous silence left by Anna's absence with my own cheerful, hollowed chatter. I told myself their anger was justified. I told myself Anna had been reckless, selfish. I was trying to convince myself that my cage was safe, that the world outside was as dangerous as my parents believed. But a dangerous seed had been planted in my mind. A terrifying question kept bubbling up. What if I left too? The thought was so monstrous, so profoundly heretical, that I felt a jolt of physical sickness. I imagined the fallout, not the screaming this time, but something far worse. The silence, the disownment, the utter severing of my entire world. Who would I be without them? I was their daughter. It was my entire identity. The fear was a physical thing. It lived in my throat, making it hard to swallow. It woke me up at night, heart pounding, drenched in sweat. I started having panic attacks in the shower, turning the water on full blast to muffle the sound of my own desperate gasping. I was terrified of my family's reaction, but even more, I was terrified of myself, this new, traitorous self that was daring to want more. The final explosion happened over something ridiculously small. I mentioned a weekend seminar on community outreach I'd seen advertised at the library. My mother, who had been simmering with a low-grade bitterness for weeks, just snapped. "Another selfish idea," she hissed, not even looking at me. "You want to abandon us, just like your sister. Is no one thinking of this family, of our shame?" It was the final straw. Decades of swallowed words, of suppressed resentment, of aching loneliness erupted out of me in a torrent of furious, sobbing words. "What about me?" I screamed, tears streaming down my face. "When does anyone think about me? I have no life. I am suffocating in this apartment, and you don't even see it." I was completely undone, my whole body shaking with the force of my own forbidden truth. I expected yelling, crying, maybe even a slap. What I got was infinitely more devastating. My mother looked at me, her face wiped clean of all emotion. Her voice was ice. "After everything we have sacrificed for you," she said slowly, "you are the most selfish girl I have ever known." And then she turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the kitchen. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of her judgment, her disappointment, her withdrawal of love. In that moment, I knew their love was conditional, and the condition was my silence, my obedience, my complete self-erasure. That silence was the sound of my old life ending. That night, I sat in the dark of my childhood bedroom. The posters on the wall were from a girl I no longer knew. The silence from my parents' room was a wall of ice. There wasn't a bolt of lightning or a sudden epiphany. There was just a cold, quiet, terrifying certainty. I could not do this for another year, let alone another 30. It would turn me to dust. With hands that trembled so badly I could barely type, I opened my laptop. The glow of the screen felt like a spotlight in the darkness. I went to the university website I had bookmarked weeks ago. I clicked on social work programs. I navigated to scholarships for first-generation students. Each click felt like a hammer blow against the foundation of my family, an act of unforgivable betrayal. But as I started to fill out the application, another feeling began to surface, faint but persistent. It felt like breathing. For the first time in a very, very long time, it felt like I was breathing my own air. The acceptance letter came in a thin envelope, a scholarship to a university in Chicago. It didn't feel real. I hid it under my mattress and would take it out late at night, just staring at my own name printed next to the words, "We are pleased to inform you." It was a passport to another life. A few weeks later, in the dead of night while the apartment was silent, I packed a single suitcase, just the essentials, my favorite books, a few clothes, the hidden acceptance letter. The hardest part was the note. I wrote and rewrote it a dozen times, my tears smudging the ink. I tried to explain my love for them, a love that felt as real as the pain. I tried to explain that I wasn't running from them, but toward myself. I left it on the kitchen table, right next to the salt shaker, a surreal domestic detail in the middle of my life's biggest detonation. Closing the apartment door behind me, so quietly it didn't even click, was the single most difficult act of my life. But when I stepped out onto the empty, silent street at 3 a.m., the cool air on my face felt like freedom. It was terrifying, and it was glorious. The silence was absolute and immediate. It was a weapon, and it was wielded with brutal precision. Days turned into a week, and my phone remained dead. When I finally summoned the courage to call them, the line would ring twice and then click, the sound of my father hanging up on me. My texts, filled with desperate pleas and declarations of love, vanished into a void, marked only by the sterile blue delivered receipt. I was a ghost to them. The shunning rippled outwards through our community. I called my aunt, my mother's sister, hoping for an ally, a bridge. Instead, I got a lecture. "How could you break your parents' hearts like this?" she cried, her voice thick with accusation. "After all they've been through, to lose both their daughters." Then she hung up. Cousins I had grown up with, she had secrets with, unfriended and blocked me on social media. It was a coordinated erasure. I was no longer a person. I was a cautionary tale, a disgrace. The judgment followed me 1,000 miles to Chicago. Every time I saw a family laughing in a park or a mother and daughter shopping together, a wave of grief and shame would hit me so hard I'd have to stop and catch my breath. The isolation was a physical presence, a cold, heavy blanket that I couldn't shake off. The silence from my family was deafening, but the noise inside my own head was worse. Guilt was a relentless interrogator. It woke me up at 3 a.m., replaying memories on a loop. My father working 2 jobs, my mother's hands chapped from cleaning other people's houses. They did all that for you, and this is how you repaid them? You are a monster, ungrateful. The loneliness in my tiny, sparse student apartment was a living thing. Some days, the familiar, suffocating pain of my old life seemed preferable to the vast, terrifying emptiness it is no one. At least then I wasn't alone. I'd walk through my new neighborhood, a complete unknown, and feel a wave of homesickness so profound it was nauseating. I missed the smell of my mother's cooking. I missed my father's quiet presence. I missed being someone's daughter. I questioned my decision 100 times a day, wondering if I had made a catastrophic, irreversible mistake. My first semester was a disaster. The emotional strain made it impossible to concentrate, and the financial reality was a constant, grinding stress. My part-time library job barely covered my food, let alone the rent. An unexpected dental bill wiped out the last of my meager savings. My laptop, my only connection to my studies, sputtered and died. I was eating instant noodles for dinner every night and still falling behind. I failed a midterm exam, the red F on the paper feeling like a final verdict on my entire life. I had failed. I had lost my family, my home, my past. And now I was failing at the one thing I had sacrificed it all for. I remember sitting on the cold linoleum floor of my kitchen, my phone in my hand, my parents' number on the screen. This was it. I was done. I was going to call, beg for their forgiveness, and tell them I was coming home. I would be the good daughter again. I would accept the cage. The fight was gone. I was exhausted, broken, and utterly defeated. I had lost everything for absolutely nothing. With the last of my energy, I went to my professor's office hours, not for help, but to officially withdraw from the program. Dr. Anya Sharma was an older woman with kind, weary eyes that seemed to understand things before you said them. I mumbled something about financial issues and personal problems. I couldn't look at her. She listened patiently, and then, instead of reaching for a withdrawal form, she leaned forward. "Let me tell you a story," she said softly. "My parents didn't speak to me for 7 years after I left home to go to university. She told me about her own journey, the guilt, the isolation, the crushing weight of disappointing the people she loved most. This path is not selfish, Lena," she said, and hearing her say my name felt like an anchor. "It is necessary. The wound of your family is deep, but you are not broken because of it. You are brave." It wasn't advice. It wasn't a solution. It was validation. A single voice in the wilderness telling me I wasn't a monster. It was a tiny flicker of light in the deepest darkness, but it was enough. I didn't withdraw. Professor Sharma helped me find an application for an emergency student grant and connected me with a better-paying on-campus job transcribing lectures. It wasn't easy. The climb back was slow and unsteady, but something had shifted. The journey felt purposeful now, not just painful. I started with small acts of courage. I forced myself to join a study group, my voice shaking the first time I offered an opinion. I found a student club for first-generation Americans, and in a small, crowded room, I heard echoes of my own story and theirs. I wasn't alone. I started volunteering at a local immigrant resource center, the very work I had dreamed of doing. I channeled my pain, my unique understanding of cultural conflict, into helping others. And one day, when a new friend asked about my family, I said clearly and without shame, "It's complicated, and I'd rather not talk about it right now." It was the first real boundary I had ever set. Each small step, each tiny victory, was a brick I was laying for a new foundation, one that was entirely my own. 2 years later, I stood at a podium, presenting my capstone project. The title on the screen behind me read, "Breaking the Cycle, Intergenerational Trauma and Self-Actualization in Immigrant Families." I spoke with a clarity and a passion that the girl cowering in her parents' kitchen would never have recognized. I wasn't shrinking anymore. I was taking up space. My voice was steady. I realized in that moment that my peace was no longer contingent on an apology or a phone call that might never come. My validation didn't come from my family's approval. It came from the marrow of my bones, forged in loneliness and reclaimed in purpose. I was no longer just a daughter. I was a social worker, a scholar, a friend, a survivor. I was whole, all on my own. Sometimes I see pictures of that younger me, the girl with the sad eyes who tried so hard to be perfect, and my heart aches for her. I want to reach back in time and hold her. I want to tell her, your first duty is not to them. It is to the truth of your own soul. You are worthy of every single one of your dreams. It's okay to walk away. I know you're terrified of being alone, but that loneliness won't kill you. I promise. It's the thing that will save you.
Thank you, Lena, for entrusting us with your profound story of courage. Her journey is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most loving act is the act of choosing yourself. What part of Lena's story resonated with you? Let us know in the comments below. And if you are moved today, please like this video and subscribe to Unbroken Women for more stories that honor the strength of the female spirit.